according to tradition. James chapter 1, verses 17 through 27. Every generous act of giving, with every perfect gift, is from above, coming down from the Creator of lights, from whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. In fulfillment of God's purpose, we are born by the word of truth, so that we may become a kind of first fruits. You must understand this, my beloved. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, for our anger does not produce God's righteousness. Therefore, rid yourselves of all sordidness and rank growth of wickedness, and welcome with meekness the implanted word that has the power to save your souls. But be doers of the word, not merely hearers who deceive themselves. For if any are hearers of the word and not doers, they are like those who look at themselves in a mirror. For they look at themselves and on going away immediately forget what they were like. But those who look into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and persevere, being not hearers who forget, but doers who act, they will be blessed in their doing. If they think they are religious and do not bridle their tongues, but deceive their hearts, their religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God is this: to care for the orphans and the widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. Then from Mark chapter 7 in selected verses. Now when the Pharisees and some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem gathered around him, they noticed that some of his disciples were eating with defiled hands, that is, without washing them. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they are thoroughly washing their hands, thus observing the tradition of their elders. And they do not eat anything from the market unless they wash it. And there are also other traditions that they observe, and washing of cups and pots and bronze kettles. So the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, "Why do your disciples not live according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands?" Jesus said to them, "Isaiah prophesied rightly against you hypocrites, as it is written, 'This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines. You abandon the commandment of God and hold to human tradition.'" Then he called the crowd again and said to them, "Listen to me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside a person that by going in can defile, but the things that come out are what defile. For it is from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come: fornication, theft, murder, adultery, greed, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person." This is the word of God. I'm the eldest in my family, and I felt perhaps it was my responsibility to keep my younger sister and later on my younger brothers in line, although we really were a generation apart with my younger brothers. But I knew that if we got into trouble, I was in trouble with everybody. If my mother had told my sister and I to clean the house, and my sister didn't do her share, I was also going to be grounded. If my mother told us to stay home, and my sister ran off with her friends, I also was going to be grounded. In fact, grounding with my mother was not a pleasant event, because it was not just staying home for a week or two. It was receiving a strong and very verbal, long lecture. And lecture is kind of an understatement. And consequently, I became upset with my sister quite a bit, because she was one of these headstrong young girls who just decided to go her own way whenever she wanted to. And in fact would make a mess whenever she wanted to, even though we were supposed to be cleaning the house. And yes, I know Governor Pritzker wants us to wear the mask, but I'm the only one in the room who's not. Yeah. And I think you want to hear me a little better. But this went on and on. It was a real frustration for me, because there were certain rules that my mother laid down that you just had to obey. And there are certain rules that my mother laid down that my sister just had to ignore. And the consequence was trouble. Now, obeying rules is kind of a common concept for kids. It's easy to understand. It's your first understanding of ethics. I've talked about this many times. That is the way kids do things. By age 2, a kid will say, no, 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 no. And they know what they're not supposed to do. But if they want to do it anyway, they'll say, no, 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 and they'll go over and do it. Some of your moms and dads will recognize that stage in the kid's life. And then by age 4, they don't bother saying no, 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 no. They'll be a little more surreptitious about it. And it's like, I got into the cookie jar, and they would take it over and eat cookies right before supper. And mom and dad will recognize that, because they aren't hungry for the good food and skip over the broccoli. They've broken the rules. And gradually, they become more aware of those rules. And they recognize there will be consequences. They will be grounded. They will be scolded. They might be spanked. That is the way we function as children. That is the way the church sometimes functions today. We say that there are rules that define ethics in the Christian church. We say that there's rules that define the law in our society. We drive through town here. We're supposed to go 25 miles an hour on a regular street, right? Yet, how many times have we seen the teenagers go 40 or 50 miles an hour past our house, right? And maybe they're older than teenagers. And you wonder why the sheriff doesn't pick them up and give them a ticket. It's called pietism. The understanding that ethics are about rules and whether or not we will be punished. That's the way the Pharisees were acting today. They were saying there are certain rules that have been passed down to us from our elders. We wash our hands. We wash our pots and plates. Now, I'm not going to eat at your house if you don't ever wash your pots and plates, but that's not about a rule. That's about the fact that I don't want food poisoning. But then there are those who think that's not the way the church works. They pick on that law of liberty that's mentioned in James, a freedom that comes from Christ. There was a scholar I had to read in seminary. His name is James Gustafson. And I didn't really like reading his books. I don't agree with him. But he says that the church is only about the forgiveness of sins. It is only about making it into heaven. Some of you might feel that way today. And so the church does not teach us ethics. It's only about taking away the laws, taking away the rules. He's wrong. It's not that simple. We don't need to be like my sister and say, I'm going to run down to the park with my friends even though I'm supposed to have the house cleaned. If we act like that all the time, take off the mask, people will get sick. We know it. We've seen it. We can ignore the rules, but there are consequences. We drive 50 miles an hour through town. Eventually, we're going to hit somebody. It's a fact. No getting around that. And if we hit that kid running across from the park, we're going to feel guilt. Where is our love and concern for others? And as I mentioned before, James claims to be the brother of Christ. Now, whether or not that's a fact, I'm not going to argue with you about that. But I am going to say that this epistle sets itself up to be one of the most important epistles about ethics. It wants itself to be taken seriously, so it makes that claim. This is a special epistle. And it acknowledges that there's an attitude among the early church that there are things that Jesus is concerned about more important than just keeping the Old Testament law. Let's not keep out the disciples. Okay, we claim to be the disciples of Christ, right? Let's not keep to laws and rules that are kind of purposeless, really, when it comes down to it. If I go to your house and you have done a poor job of washing your dishes and I see a spot or two on the plate, I don't get worried about food poisoning. And I don't get too worried about your cleaning either. I just very politely take your pork chop and maybe eat off the other side of the plate, or just ignore it, is what we do. Because it's far more important that we have a great fellowship and dinner together than it is to pay attention to that spot on the plate. And Jesus asked the Pharisees, what is the most important thing? What you bring into your mouth or what goes out of your mouth? What you bring into your mouth is really inconsequential. The rules we set up really are inconsequential. With my sister and I, what was most important, and I know that now because I'm a little older than when I was 10, is being a brother and a sister. And we talk fairly regularly on the phone now. And for the most part, we don't argue very much. Now there's times, but we love each other. We take care of each other. We watch out for each other. What is it in your hearts that comes out of you? And that's what James is asking us today. What is it that comes out of our hearts that is important? It is a question of how do we reshape our hearts to produce good works? Be doers of the word, not merely hearers of the word. When we love others, we will care for others. We will say, what is our caring for orphans and widows? And there's a third category that James doesn't mention, but it's an important part of Christian ethics. That is to care for the stranger as well. And to remain unstained by the world. To remain unstained by a world that says, me first. The attitudes of the world that says, I will take, I will dominate, I will control. That's the world, that's the cosmos in the Greek. The Roman army. The domination system. In the Christian tradition, it's looking after the lowest of the low. The people who cannot protect themselves. Do we turn our hearts with compassion towards them, and what will come out of us is love? That's what our text for today is asking of us. Not to keep out those things that are bad, but to give out those things which are good. Amen. Let's turn to hymn number 379, Take My Life and Let It Be.
Let them